Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Fireside Chat. My name is Richa, and it's great to see that so many of you are here, taking time out of your busy day and joining us for this exciting discussion today. I will start by introducing myself. My name is Richa, as I said. I am head of marketing at Huge Designs. I've just one liner about myself, keeping it very short. I've spent my career driving impactful marketing strategies across both B2B and B2C landscapes, currently holding the flag for Huge. So at Huge, we've spent the last 15 years building differentiated user experiences, helping businesses across industries create products that are not just functional, but truly intuitive and user centric. And as AI becomes a bigger part of our daily interactions, ensuring that it aligns with user behavior is more important than ever. That's why we're hosting this chat to bring together experts who have been deeply involved in the intersection of AI, UX, and human behavior. Today, we'll dive into how human cognitive limitations affect our interactions with AI and what needs to change to make AI more accessible, effective, and intelligent in the way it assists us. And to guide us through this, we have two brilliant minds with us today. We have Samir, CEO and founder at Huge Designs, and Ross, who is the Senior Director User Experience at ZS. So let's start with you, Samir. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Richa. And thank you everyone for joining. I hope you're as excited to hear us as we are to talk about this topic. And I'm sure, all of you have, spent your valuable morning thinking about this, how this topic is going to help you. So I hope by the end of this, you'll come to know that this is very important aspect of interaction with the newest technology, which is AI, and that's on everyone's mind. So my journey as a human factors as an industrial engineer started some 30 years back. Designing or optimizing really entire systems of man-machine systems, and was involved deeply into system design for a very long time. My background is in industrial engineering, so obviously I was trying to optimize very large manufacturing plants, then moving into quality management system design, and then something called as business process reengineering and training. Post that, I've done my graduation master's in human factors that led me to this particular subject, which wasn't called user experience back then. If you guys remember, it was called usability engineering, right? So only testing. So my journey started with usability and then metamorphosed into user experience. I lead Huge Designs for the last 15 years. Huge Designs is in the business of providing research and design solutions to our Fortune 500 and enterprise customers, making an impact through design. And that's been our passion, our mission, and that continues. I strongly believe that, we should all, or at least as a designer role, should alleviate, all the ill effects of technology that technology brings, right? And as technologies become more and more complex, one should go more and more towards humans. And especially with AI, we feel that, now it has to become an obsession to go as close to the humans as possible so that their experiences are fabulous. I'll pass it on to Ross.
Thank you. So, hi, everybody. And Richard, you can introduce me anytime. Thanks for the nice words. So like Samir, my background, my education, and entry into this world of design came through human factors as well. And so I have a PhD in human factors and applied cognitive psychology, and that has absolutely framed how I view the world in terms of system thinking, but also really the user part of that system. And that's why this topic is so important to me. And so I've worked in enterprise consulting, consumer products, healthcare. I lead a global UX team now at ZS, as we mentioned. It's a consulting and product company. and its most focus is on life science and pharmaceutical, other domains as well, but that's where it's really focused. And like Samir, you're getting a lot of wealth of information. That's a nice years of information. I guess that's a nice way to describe that we're kind of, been doing this for a long time, Samir. I Google had not been founded when I got started in this space in the 1990s. Netscape was the browser of the time. Look it up if you're not familiar with that. But one thing that marked most of my years in product design over the past many years has been when we've been talking about new products. We've been brainstorming. And someone would inevitably come up with okay, well, what if the system, you could ask it a question and and it could give you an answer, and then maybe it could provide some guidance and things like that. We would all laugh and go, all right, let's put that over in the magic box category. We truly would call it that sometimes, like, yep, that's magic. That's, whatever. Well, we've reached that time now. That's kind of fun for me. It's kind of having seen this sort of journey of us laughing about something in the future and actually seeing it come to be. And my goal is that we don't let the excitement and the potential of AI um, cause us to rush ahead and sort of neglect the human aspect of this. We do a lot right now. We talk about human-centered design, UX, and we always talk about the human in the center of that. I've seen a lot of this excitement around AI cause us to kind of rush ahead a little bit. I'm trying to keep the human focus caught up with that. So very excited about this topic that we're going to discuss today, and really see this as a huge opportunity for the groups that do it well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Samir. Thank you so much, Ross, for the quick introduction. Just before we dive in, let me quickly walk you through how today's session is going to flow. This will be a 60-minute conversation divided into two parts, 45 minutes of discussion, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. Pretty simple that way. There would be a few guidelines that we have set so that we use these 60 minutes quite efficiently. One would be that very important one, that this is an interactive session. So please feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat box. We'll address all your questions, as many as we can in the Q&A segment. So please drop your questions in the chat itself. All the questions in the chat, we will try to address them in the last 15 minutes of the session. Also, the second one is that we're here to share perspectives, challenge ideas, and learn from each other. So let's keep this conversation constructive and insightful. The Q&A will focus on today's topic only. So please share questions that are aligned with AI design or human interactions. So yes, I am done with setting the stage. Over to you, Samir and Ross. The stage is all yours.
Thank you. Samir, let's start from the beginning. I think it would be helpful to describe a little bit about what prompted your thinking when we first met to talk about this back in the fall. We kind of came together and said, we've both been thinking about this kind of at the same time. What got you heading down this path?
So the trigger was really, conversation with a customer, and that's what I do day in, day out, right? And when I went to this customer, this is a pretty large enterprise customer. They are kind of capturing data from their customers that is in terabytes, not per day, per minute. Imagine the kind of data that they have. And so they wanted all of this data to be analyzed, and business and product and engineering to kind of make decisions based on this particular data. Now, believe me, they have fantastic ML, machine learning, and AI capabilities. So they kind of built that platform there. And as usual, they wanted to open it to the users. So they built a prompt response model, a prompt response system, which is a chatbot, right? And then after observing that the results of the chatbot, at best in about 2-3 months, they could answer some of their queries very quickly, right? And that's the extent of the benefits that they got out of it. And when they analyzed, most of this data was not being used or left unused. So this customer was pretty frustrated. He had, he was the product owner of that. So he said, Samir, in this case, what do you do? Is there something in design that could help us? And then I started thinking about what's really wrong. Because on one hand, you have everything. You can just, ask those questions. So there could be two possibilities. One could be that the needs of the cohort or the needs of the users or customers may be limited, which was really untrue because this is a $25 billion company, right? So there are so many roles and so many people who want information and make business decisions. And the second I thought was there is something wrong with probably the interactions that are taking place. That led me to start thinking about, what is the human really doing here in this chatbot, and what is the AI kind of responding, right? And that led me to think about the tremendous limitations of this particular interaction model. One, while AI has almost unlimited capability, humans have very limited capability, right? On one hand, humans are limited by their past knowledge, their experiences, the patterns that they have in their mind to drive the current experience or the sequence of questions and the question itself, questioning the level of knowledge that they have as well. And on the other hand, AI having unlimited capability to store, reason, fetch data, has limited context of what the human is thinking, right? What the human is wanting as a solution and what's the exact problem. The other aspect is both humans and AI, they have biases. While humans have about, I was just reading the other day, 180 types of biases.
At least.
The largest, at least, and there could be, sub biases. The largest being the confirmation bias, where, whatever is according to your belief system, if that result comes, then you're likely to accept that more. On the contrary, if that doesn't match, then the human needs a lot of convincing through logic, through numbers, through social proof, through emotions, and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, I also saw that AI has biases from the data that is trained on itself. And that was, really funny, because I tried that. And let me kind of share a quick example here, um, so that I can demonstrate what I'm talking about. And this is real, right? So I'm not making this up. Okay, so this is your famous chat GPT. I hope everyone can see.
Yes.
And I did this just today afternoon, right? I said image of a left-handed man writing. This is what came up. And then I said, okay, I've demonstrated a lack of proper English probably, right? So so then I said image of a man writing with his left hand. And you will see this image has come up.
Mm-hmm.
This is Chat GPT, right? So you can see the bias of the AI. It is pretty evident that AI can work only if the data is right, right? And then there are other, limitations of this particular model where humans do not know what's possible, right? What can be done? What is the limitation? And therefore, the creativity of humans in asking those questions also is limited. In fact, humans also have, limitations about short-term memory, and then long-term memory recall takes time, and so on and so forth, right? So all in all, this is like a constrained interaction model is what
Yeah.
I thought, right? And that's where we started talking that this is the idea. And then you kind of expanded on it saying, hey, wait a minute, right?
Yeah.
How about human
Yeah.
limitations? How about that perspective? How did you think about that?
Yeah.
Tell us
Well,
more about that.
it's what you were describing, right? So this idea about what's possible, of what can be done, and how you get started. And what got me thinking about this was the number of times I heard people say, "I'm just not sure what I can get from AI. I don't know what I can ask AI." It wasn't that they didn't think that AI offered anything. It was more them saying, "I don't know what I need to do. I don't know what all is possible for me to do this." And even myself, when I would hear another example of how someone used AI to answer some type of question, I'd go, shoot, that's good. Like, why didn't I think of that? That's very interesting. And so when you and I were talking, I think we started, I don't know if you remember this or not. We haven't actually talked about this since then, but we kind of talked about, like, imagine you had this genie in a bottle and you could ask any question of it that you want to ask. You could ask it for any wish that you want. And you think about it and you go, I want a sandwich. And it's like, well, I mean, that's not a bad wish if you're hungry at the time, but you could have asked for anything. And I think that kind of relates to how I see a lot of folks in terms of this conversational use of this prompt-based use of AI and sort of this idea of, well, what can I do? So the idea is that, I started thinking about this is not everybody knows what to ask. And then I started going, okay, well, how do we address that? And then as I kind of dug into it, I think it's a lot more than just lack of awareness. It's also what you were describing, those human limitations in terms of how we think and how we view the world and our biases and our past experiences. And we're going to talk more about these kind of things like limited creativity and so forth. All of that kind of holds us back in a way. And where I come from as a designer, as a human factors person is, all right, fine, that's great. Let's not try to engineer the human. How do we change the system? How do we change the tool so that it's actually encouraging? It's actually helping. It's actually helping, not making those biases and those limitations worse, but actually starting to improve those. And so if we're going to take that human-centered approach, we have to consider AI also from that same perspective. And I think, and to me, this is like, as we were talking about, it's just like, this is an opportunity. This is a differentiator for those groups that do that, right? You can drop a chatbot into a place, but if you do it in the right way, or if you change that and don't, there's just different ways of, if you really approach it from the perspective of the user and what they're trying to get out of it, I think that the people that do that the best are going to be very well recognized.
Absolutely, agreed to that. And before we jump into, what could be the solutions, I'd like to just touch base for,
Good.
those folks. I see a diverse group here, and talk a little bit about human limitations, right? And how these human limitations affect the way we look at systems, design systems, and the interaction of systems. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what are some of the common traditional examples here, of human limitations. And then probably, Ross, you can add to the
Okay,
Gen AI context to that, right?
we'll do it.
So one of the key limitation is cognitive load, right? And cognitive load, if people don't know, is the mental effort required to do a job successfully, right? And that, if there is a lot of cognitive load, means a lot of information overload, information bombarded at you, then your learning could be impaired, your decision making could be impaired, and many other things. So recent examples, I'm sure, if there are Gen Zs and some others, millennials as well, you're too familiar with the first example, right? I don't know what to see, and keep on scrolling and scrolling, and that happens quite often because
I
there are
have that
too
problem
many
too, Samir.
recommendations.
Don't, it's not
Really?
just Gen Z. I have that problem too. Okay.
Okay, I didn't know. But yeah, I mean, it's a human problem. But
Yes,
too many
right.
recommendations on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
And I gave up after I downloaded a few financial apps and couldn't figure out, where to invest and what to invest in, because everything looked almost the same after a certain time, right? And that's a huge problem with humans. And one of the experiments that I did recently also, I gave a pretty easy prompt to ChatGPT, right? For example, okay, can you outline, let's say, marketing strategies for the next 3 months for a small company, that is a design company and does blah blah blah. Okay, and then I kind of entered that, got a very good, apparently very good answer, right? And then I started refining that. So I put some two more sentences. By the fourth response, I did not know what was right and what was the best option, right? And you guys can try that at home or wherever you are, and that's a huge problem. The other limitations of humans are attention and memory. Okay. So wherever you put your attention, you cannot have attention on three, four, five things at the same time. Again, because of information overload and a limited capacity, and because of memory, right? We have three different types of memory. One is your short-term memory, which is probably 15 to 30 seconds. Your working memory is an extension of your short-term memory, which lets you probably remember something like math calculation in your mind, for example. And the short-term memory is just looking at a phone number and dialing it, right? And then you have a long-term memory, which stores all of the information that you have, but it also has limitations in terms of recall of what you need at the right time, right? So there are these shortcomings of attention as well as memory, um, and of course cognitive and emotional bias. So we talked about one of the biases, which is confirmation bias. This is another type of evidence bias. A person who strongly supports, let's say, an ideology tends to seek out news and social media content that aligns with their existing beliefs, right? So they kind of take it as the gospel truth, and others is they look at it very skeptically. Limited imagination. So probably 40, 50 years ago, nobody really imagined that we would have mobile phones, and we would be talking across the continents to different people and seeing them in person. Only a few probably had envisioned that, and of course Simpsons. I can't forget them. And then another example is Netflix. When they entered into that of live streaming, Blockbuster just said, "Oh, this business is not going to work," and we all know what happened really. And also another limitation is struggling with complexity, right? An example here could be, filing your taxes without assistance, dealing with all the complex rules and laws and everything, right? So humans struggle with complexity. Therefore, we see that all of the different systems interfaces are trying to dumb it down, right? Just one thing at a time. And that lets the human complete their tasks. Um, Ross, you want to talk about um, some AI examples? How?
So I think that's, I'm glad you gave the background there. And I want to add a little more. We're just kind of shifting. You can see that we're heading along the way toward getting to, go to the next slide, by the way. I think it's the next slide.
Oh, yeah.
Let's
Oh, no,
see.
sorry,
Yeah.
I missed this. This is
Oh, yeah, go
dependency
ahead.
versus over-reliance. So I'll just
Yeah,
complete this.
yeah, go
You're
ahead.
dependent solely on technology. This is what happens. Drivers following Google Maps blindly into a dead-end roads. That has actually happened. And then constantly using GPS, even on familiar routes, can weaken the connections in your brain. In fact, I remember in 2004, when the first time the GPSs kind of came, I wrote an article about this. And then we had a very healthy debate on. I was of the opinion that you would not use that section of the brain for something else. And then somebody else said, no, we would use it for higher functions. We all know what's happening. Sorry. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, very good. Yeah, good. And so we're going to get where we're headed is to talk a little bit about what all this means for design. And so I want to take a few of these that we were just kind of talking about, and some additional ones, and talk a little bit about how AI and can get in the way, some of these biases can get in the way of us getting the most value. So in terms of attention and memory, one of the reasons this is such a problem is that overwhelming users with information can be just as bad as not providing enough information to them. And if we think about this from an AI standpoint, just because AI can generate a lot of suggestions, answers, information, content, it doesn't mean it should always be presented to the end user, right? So that's one of these key, as we talk about this, what we hope, if we kind of remember anything from this conversation today, is those limitations have an impact. And so how we create and how we share information back to the user can either help with those limitations or it can hurt with those limitations. Because as we know, people can only process so much information, and as you tax their mental capacities, it starts to reduce their performance, like time, accuracy, speed, but also their decision making. And so that's an important factor. Another one, we talked a little bit about this, was this idea of complexity. Too many problems, too many options, can create problems for people. As designers and product designers, we sometimes think, hey, let's get as much in there as possible. Like, let's just, more information is better, more options are better, more steps are better, more choices are better. But it actually can take more time. And as we described, it can also lead to a negative impacts on decision making. One reason I think we sometimes do this, and this is just a broader design term, or broader design consideration, is we assume users have the same knowledge of the system or the process that we do. And our curse of knowledge can cause us to provide a lot more options, a lot more choices to people than they need at that stage. and can also create problems for end users. And a lot of times we're so driven by reducing clicks, right? Reducing clicks, reducing scrolling, which aren't bad things to try to reduce, but many times in doing that, we create a bigger cognitive burden for people, which we want to try to avoid. We've talked about, go to the next slide. We've talked about cognitive bias a number of times here. The idea that if we like what we see, well, we trust that data. If we don't like what we see, well, we distrust it. We need more information. And so as we think about AI, some areas that you can deal with is, how does AI respond to people with information? How easy is it for someone to understand what the data source is for people? So the idea that I may not trust something, but I see the source of that data, and it may help me actually trust it differently now. And as Samir said, bias is not just a human limitation. There can be bias in the AI itself, and that's something to be considered. And finally, I think I wanted to mention this idea. We've mentioned it a couple of times. Some of those are good examples of the cars and Netflix and Blockbuster and so forth. But this is a big one, is the challenge of that limited imagination. And it varies across people, but people will tend to focus on tangibles and rather than abstract possibilities. And if you think about staring at an AI chatbot type of screen, that's all about possibilities. Like the world is yours. And back to our genie in the ball example, it's why people ask, when you can ask for anything, you ask for a sandwich. It's because of that limits in terms of your imagination, but also how people ground themselves in those past experiences is really what we need to think about, and ask ourselves, how can AI help break that with people? How can we help them get beyond that? And so we need to be aware of all of these limits, and as we think about our AI experience, and how can we, being aware of them helps us to not make them worse, right? And so I think we're going to shift now into talking a little bit about some design opportunities related to this, and share some more examples. And I think there's some things that will really be helpful to apply.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. The more the
Good.
limitations,
Yeah.
we could probably tackle those challenges head on. I
Mhm.
always, think that wherever there are limitations, the other side of the coin is opportunities, right?
Yep,
And
it is.
so, what do you think about what are the common opportunities that you foresee?
Well, so one of the um, I think something we haven't talked about, but I want to bring it up because we're talking about how to help people accomplish things with AI, is around this topic around who adapts, right? So does a human adapt or does a tool adapt? Now, if you know much about human factors, you know that one of the primary rules is the human should not be the one to adapt. The problem is humans are great at adapting for a short period of time and in small ways. We will adapt to things, but there are other costs and trade-offs that come along with that. And so what we want to do is we should not rely on that. We should find ways that the system can adapt to the user's needs and their abilities and their expectations. And one topic that I'm sure everyone has heard about, or maybe even experienced a little bit, is an area of AI that I feel like kind of goes against that idea of the system adapting to the user. And that's around that topic of prompt engineering. Because what we say is, we are engineering the prompt, but if you really think about it, we're trying to engineer the human, right? And so that they ask better questions, so that AI can respond in a better way. We tell users what they need to learn and how they need to talk and how they need to craft their questions in order to kind of give the best, for AI to give the best response. And I've even seen suggestions to people to say, and make sure you say thank you and say please. Now, there's nothing wrong with being polite. I'm not trying to say that we need we should give up all of those kinds of things, but it's just another example of telling the user how to approach the great AI so the AI will be able to work for them. I'm not against teaching people how to get the most out of the system or a product or a tool. That's not what I'm saying. But we should give as much thought to how the system itself can help the user craft good questions and not leave it up to them and their biases and their lack of imagination and so forth. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, and you touched on this, Samir, and we're not going to dive deep into this, but I think it makes sense to describe it, is when we think about AI, we need to think about how do we bring the intelligence to the user, right? Where they are, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish. And I I jokingly say I don't want to have to walk to the mountaintop every time I need some insight. So if I'm working in a tool here and I want information here, don't make me leave and go somewhere else. Don't make me go do that. I don't take me so don't require me to sort of break my train of thought. Don't require me to go and have my memory. Okay, now what was it I was looking at? How do I ask this? And so we've been talking a lot about conversational AI, chatbots, and things like that, which makes sense. I mean, that's a big use of this. But we getting away from that model is another way to consider addressing the limitations that people have. The chatbot sort of structure itself may not be the way to best provide information and to deal with a bias that people have or limitation that people have. There may be another way of embedding AI in a part of somebody's workflow.
Absolutely. Extending on what you just said, I also feel that there is also an opportunity missed here while designing the AI itself, right? Because AI is learning the context and it is learning from humans, there should have actually been role reversal. Typically, when we do user research, right, we go like, "Oh, I'm a learner, you are the expert," and then we literally sit there like a student and learn from the humans, and we can then elicit the deepest level of motivation, psychographics, expectations, needs. Similar to that, if AI could have been that learner and asked us questions, right? A role reversal instead of we saying, "Oh, I'm asking questions," and then you tell me, and then I again figure out whether this is the right thing. You ask me questions, then you will
Amen.
keep on as AI set the context. And as a consequence, it could be faster probably and also better for the humans rather than the other way around, right? So that's
Yeah.
another missed opportunity.
Oh,
Um,
great point.
yeah. So let's change gears a little bit now that we have outlined the limitations of human AI interactions. Let's think about what's the solution? What's the real solution to this, right? And we may not have all the answers right now, but at least as practitioners of human factors and user experience, we could lay down not guidelines, but at least certain principles
Yes.
on this, right? So I'm going to share again, and talk about a few of them that I thought about. And this is probably not an exhaustive list that we have put
Nope.
together,
Nope.
but I hope this can help, right? Couple of them are, one is guided exploration and other is cognitive augmentation, right? And guided exploration is what I was just referring to. It's basically balancing user autonomy with system-driven assistance. It doesn't mean that you kind of feed everything, but you guide the user, guide the human towards their goal. So understanding of the goal and then guide them. It's not a rigid step-by-step function, right? That's not A, B, C, D. It's actually understanding the concept and then given give the human the freedom to explore the possibilities of what could be done with the AI, right? Which the human in the first place doesn't know. So if the human has this much of knowledge, you can probably guide them a little bit outside this circle, saying, "Hey, have you thought about this? Do you want something like this?" Right? So maybe progressive hints, contextual recommendations, some kind of support to help users make informed decisions, right? And couple of examples we see going towards that. These might be very early type examples, and maybe AI has advanced and people have thought about more things because every day there are improvements in leaps and bounds. But an example could be the auto suggestion. Now we
Yep.
have auto suggestions literally everywhere, right? And then this is an example of Amazon's assisted AI experience. When you're looking at something, a product, at the bottom you can see those typical questions, right? Which probably earlier would have been FAQs, but now these are based on what a lot of people are looking at, right? How can you make a buying decisions? And these are some of the parameters. The questions are based on these particular parameters, right? So these are some of the guidelines one of them. And the other could be, augmentation, right? So first one is guiding me towards a possible solution, but the second one is enhancing human thinking and enhancing decision making and problem solving abilities, amplifying human cognition, right? So providing them insights, guiding them is probably, navigating towards, but then augmentation refers to how can I provide recommendations or insights that the human has not even thought about, right? And that kind of automation helps users process complex information more effectively.
Yeah.
Um, this is a critical principle in human AI interaction design because it also ensures that the AI acts as a collaborator, not a complete autonomous replacement to the human, right?
Yeah.
And when I started thinking about this in terms of how humans behave, right? Humans have a certain pattern of thinking, which we refer to as mental models. And different sets of humans have different mental models in different circumstances and situations. I almost feel that the AI should learn, it is a mental model shaper. The cognitive
Mm.
augmentation is a mental model shaper. Oh,
Hmm.
you are thinking in these two different mental models, but hey, here's another mental model to think about, right? If you take this route. So the learning also becomes faster, quicker, and you get to your goal in a shortest time and with accuracy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
These are some of the examples, not of mental model shaping, but of cognitive augmentation. You start typing something, and kind of they on the fly probably they change the version or the grammar and things like that. And then today you have not just Google Lens, but many other examples like Snapchat that let you create something out of the ordinary, right? Which you have not even imagined.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let me
Ross.
let me go. I want to go kind of quickly through this last couple of slides, but I want to go back to your mention of AI as a learner. I think that's a really interesting place, and I think spend a little more time there with some of these examples because one of the cool things about AI use is that we can instruct AI how to think, right? So we can instruct AI how to respond, and so just as we consider like the voice and tone, many times we want to make sure it matches up with our branding and our marketing and maybe the reading level that we want to talk to. We should think about how can we use that training to instruct AI to help address these common sort of some of these limitations and biases that we've been talking about. And so don't have all the answers here, but just want to kind of provide a few of these. So one of the things we know, right? People tend to allow the emotion of the presenter or the way the slides look or whatever it might be to add value or worth to that. Right. So something looks great, high value and high worth. And so the question is, can we tune the AI responses to really focus on data and try to present data in a way that's not selling or trying to convince the user, right? We can instruct AI in a way to do less of this, right? Help people not make biased decisions. We know that people, we've talked about this a couple of times, look for information that supports the beliefs they already hold. So what does that mean for AI? Right. So I've had this confirmation bias, and we're not saying that AI should always go, well, but did you know there's another option? But how could you present that in such a way? Right. So maybe when AI is providing that answer, the solution to that, a solution is to say, opponents of this view cite this and this, or a contrary view to this is that. It's not trying to say your view is wrong, but there's something else you could consider. Even as we provide prompts to people that they could select from and kind of ask questions by choosing a prompt, making sure that there are prompts in there that are sort of the pros and cons of each of these things. We've talked about this idea about a little bit that humans complexity, but we need to think about our systems and how they focus on presenting the most relevant information so that we're not as distracted, right? One way of doing this is a fairly standard paradigm in design is progressive disclosure, right? So in progressive disclosure, you present information and then the user has to make a choice about what else they might want to expand or see more of. And it sounds like, well, that's pretty straightforward, but the idea is trying not to overwhelm people, provide the best information up front, and then allow the user, depending on what else they want to know, to go a little deeper, and so that they're not so overwhelmed as they go along. I think we talk a lot about bias that people have related to AI, or not AI, but just in general, is when we hear the first thing we hear, sometimes we put more weight on that. So how do we address that from an AI perspective? I don't actually know, because obviously something is going to be presented first. There's some response that's presented first, but how do we deal with that, right? Is it about making a much simpler answer? Is it about making things more relevant to people? I think I guess framing is just really about the idea of, like, when you present information, you can present information in a way that could be sort of make equal options actually one seem better than the other. And so way of dealing with that is through counter framing, and that's just something you can do more research on if you need it. But how do we it's basically providing multiple both options to something, and making sure that AI does that in the appropriate way. And then I think the other thing is as we provide this support to users in terms of prompts, I think that's another big area. And so I'm just going to dance through a few screens here just to show you a few examples of how other ways that people have been supporting what could be asked, and a little bit about how to ask it. These aren't final solutions by any means, and some of these I'm sure you've seen before, but you may never have thought about this, but it's like, yeah, this is actually helping with that limitation of people's biases and their inability to kind of understand the full system. So Copilot, so they give users some idea of what to, like, these are the kinds of things you could search for. Now, they're not contextual. I may be coming in here to get information about a moon landing, and none of these have anything to do with that. But maybe over time, it starts to kind of change, kind of expand my view and how I think about these things. Go to the next slide. In Copilot, you also have the ability to see your prompt gallery. So it's just more prompts based on different categories. Again, not in context of what you're doing. You can save some of your own prompts in here. It's an interesting way to do that. Go to the next one. This here, it's actually giving you sort of these themes to choose from to start with that seem to be based on what's happening sort of in popular topics at the time, right? So they're kind of, it's maybe a little better than just generic examples, but it's still not necessarily why you came in here, but it's maybe making a guess at that. What's happening is that what we're doing is we're helping people know what they can ask, and starting to get past some of that limited imagination and bias, and even speeding up performance. What you see here, these are like auto suggestions that we've seen before, right? So you could imagine how this could help users craft more in-depth questions, less biased questions. Go ahead. And then this is actually a step even more. So I've asked a question about the moon landing, and now it's telling, like, it's kind of saying, well, what were the goals of the Apollo mission, and how many people have walked on the moon? It's kind of telling me, like, hey, here's some other types of questions you can ask. So again, it's pushing me past my limits, but it's also physically saving me time. I don't have to go in and type this question in. I can just tap a button and get that. Next slide will actually show you what a result of from Perplexity is. When you see at the bottom there, here's all these are related. You tap the plus and you get this broad answer here. And you can also see some of the other information about the sources there, so I can kind of understand who's talking about this, and maybe if I get back to the idea of, do I trust this? Do I believe in that? And then the last one I'll mention, and this goes back to what you talked about, Samir, is the system actually providing asking you some questions. So if you go to the next slide, if it will. But yeah, so this is one where the question is like, hey, can you create an image for my presentation? I need something that represents key points. And it's like, sure, I can do that. These are the kinds of things that would help me to be able to do that for you. So in this instance, someone didn't have to train me to do this. It's at the point of use that it's saying, here you go. This is what would help me to do this. This is much more friendly than saying, all right, go to training and then show up and talk to AI and ask it questions. This is AI doing like you would if you stop by a friend's house and ask them for something. They go, yeah, here's the kind of things that we might need to know. So these are just a start, but they're examples of using design, using what we're presenting to AI, and using AI to address some of these limitations. Now, not all the limitations we talked about. There's a lot of other ways of considering that. But what's key about this is recognizing those limitations, and then taking an intentional action as we design and develop and train the AI to be more of a true helper and assistant to the people that are using.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's fantastic. There are more principles. I don't think we have mentioned here, but definitely we have outlined those principles in our white paper, of which Richa, you can probably send a link. But I'll just breeze through them very quickly. Some of the principles are transparency, which means how AI could be transparent to the user. And this all relates to building trust, as you saw
Yeah.
with the left-hand writing example, right? That would definitely not build trust. And explainability, right? How AI is making decisions. For example, today we have AI that is making decisions on whether to accept a medical claim or not, right? And then people would want to know what's the basis of a decision, especially if it goes against them, right? The other design principles are about user control and feedback. To what extent should we provide control to the user, control over their own, tasks versus the outcome? And with the advent of AI agents, which are going more towards autonomous kind of activities, this point becomes very important. Of course, trust and reliability are at the top. Trust with machines has been a subject and topic of debate for quite a while. And with AI, for example, I always, ask this: if tomorrow you have a AI nanny and they tell you to feed your child XYZ medicine, would you do that? Right? Think about that. And then personalization and error and handling. So these are some of the principles that definitely, and in no way that these are like, this is like an exhaustive list, but this is just our attempt to, start this conversation about how we can look at design principles, how we can look at limitations, and then, probably design a system. It may not happen today, but down the line, that kind of works for all.
Well, I think I know we do the questions real quick, but I just wanted to say, I think it's the intentionality of this that really matters. It's the actually saying, you know what, the humans do have limits. And so let's think through what those limits are. Let's think through how we address this. And let's just be intentional about the design as opposed to saying, here's a tool, let's give it to the users and they can just use it. So it's that thought of like, how do we really be purposeful about design and purposeful about the experience and what people are trying to get out of it and what we're trying to get across?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Samir and Ross. This was such an insightful discussion. I think so insightful that our participants haven't asked any questions, so they might have understood everything you guys spoke
Mhm.
about,
Or
Well,
nothing.
and or nothing.
no, hopefully not that. But so I'll just give a recent example. And so um, we were considering basically we someone came up with the idea of saying what happens when the user wants to ask a question and on their screen. And so the one of the brainstorm solution was, well, the user could pull out their phone and they could access our chat tool there and they could ask the question and we're like, okay, that solves the problem, but it requires the user to rely, taking actions to go grab the phone and go kind of do this thing, this companion. It's not much of a companion if it's in the other room, right? And so, and the other thought is, now I've brought this up, now I've got to spend time, little keyboard, little typing, little whatever, in my question. Remember what it was I was trying to ask. And so part of our question was, okay, great, that solves the problem of someone can get an answer, but how do we not create cognitive or physical burden while trying to provide these answers? And so that's when we started moving into, okay, all right, let's go back to this principle. We want to leave the person where they are. We want to help them actually craft the right kind of question that they want to ask. And so it again goes back to that intentionality, but it's even the best. I find one thing I find a lot is that people will go, I know how we can get the answer. They can ask AI. That's fine. But just asking AI, you have to think about the experience, of getting there and what you're doing. And anyway, that just came up like 2 days ago on conversations with some people that we were working with internally, and it was just like, okay, yeah, that works, but let's think through what we're actually causing the user to do and how we're not actually helping them very much.
Great. So, should we? We have a couple of questions in the comment box. Maybe I can read the first one for you guys. Yes. So, Anrit has asked, I like the thought Ross shared. Who adapts to whom, AI or humans? Given the human limitations we saw earlier, do you think there's a need for protocols or playbooks to help humans adapt in the most effective way?
To help humans adapt in the most effective way? Uh, no, I don't want to encourage human adaptation. Humans, that's the challenge with this. It's like I do used to work in healthcare, and you talk about clinicians and doctors being burdened, and the people and the mistakes that they can make, and the impact on their life, right? What they actually do physically, the impact on their life, and the problem is that the systems keep adding to it, and doctors get burned out because they want to make sure they're still delivering good care and safe care. And so they're adapting, but it's not a pure adaptation of like, yes, great, I can just do this. Something else has to give because they want to keep safety and they want to keep good care at the height. What gives? Their health, their marriages, their lifestyle, the way they treat other people. And so it's not to say that people can't adapt. And I don't want us to, it's not to say that we can't coach and teach people how to get better access out of the use of things. But I want for us to start at the point of view, and Samir, you can add to this if you like. I want us to start from the point of view is like, no, we're not going to ask the human to adapt. We're going to start from the perspective of how does the system adapt? How does the system meet the human where they are, both intellectually, both experientially, and both physically in terms of what they're working on and what they're doing. So I'm sure that we could come up with some ways to help humans learn and adapt, but I don't want us to start there. I don't want us to start at that point.
Right. I mean, if you think about 20, 30 years ago, when these complex software systems started, right, to emerge, you would have all kinds of instruction manuals on how to use them. It's the same kind of thing, right?
Just think, just
Just
think.
think, right? Who's going to read that, right? And how much are you going to, really understand that? So I believe that with the new tech, AI should be intelligent enough to adapt to the humans, right? And there are a lot of variations in terms of human intelligence, cognition, attention, memory, and so on and so forth. And I feel that in the future there would be a personalized, hyper personalized AI for each of us. That's where it's kind of should be going ideally, right? Instead of us being hyper personalized for the AI. That's what is happening today. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Good one.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the participants, we have enabled the mics. So if you want to ask your questions, you can simply raise your hand
I
and
think
do
there
it.
is another question
And
here.
then, yeah, we'll go towards the next question. AI in certain ways feels like the fast food of tech, easily available but not really healthy for the human brain. In certain cases, it also feels like it aggravates the human limitations due to over reliance. Can we resolve this by training AI or training ourselves?
We've
Well,
already established from a human
yeah.
factors perspective. That's a great
Yeah.
analogy, by the way.
Now,
I mean,
now,
whoever
now,
it is, right?
humans, but I mean, we are learning creatures, right? And so it's not to say that we are just completely helpless. And my mom, who before talking about Chat GPT, was just like, oh, that's way out of my, I have no idea. Sit down, so she can sit down and ask some questions now, right? So she learned, and so she's getting more value from it than she was before. And so it's not to say that we can't be learning people, and the tools themselves can help us learn as we go through this. And that's part of what we were talking about before is how can it kind of ask questions. But I think it's too easy to start with I want us to start with the hard problem first, which is how does the system adapt to us? Because it's very easy to tell humans to adapt. And humans many times will, again, but with those negative trade-offs that can come with it. So learning is possible, and I think that is a place to consider is how do we help people learn without making it I like to think of it as how do we help them sort of grow, if you will, as opposed to being the weak link in the system. How do we help the system really focus, I think, is on the user's needs.
Yes. So moving on to the next question. AI learns from humans. How can we create feedback loops where mistakes could be avoided?
I mean, it's highly contextual. You have to teach the context to the AI, right? And today we have systems where the AI throws answers at you. In fact, it's very interesting and it's very primitive also. I was doing something yesterday, and I remember that after a certain point, the chat GPT just stopped and it said, I need time to think and, do you want something more? But you will have to give me feedback. And I said, fine. Right. So I had a list of 1 to 15 and I said, please
Mm.
continue. It gave me a list of 16 to 20 and there were two options and they were exactly the same, not a single word here and there. And it was
Mm.
asking me to choose between which of those two responses is actually better, right? So this kind of feedback loop will actually not help, but there has to be a substantial difference between the answers. Only then, the humans can help saying what's the accuracy, what is, matching with my particular need, and what is out of context. And that did not happen in the example that I just mentioned.
So I know we're at time, and I'll just say this is that now you've seen a lot of the chat bots and so forth, the thumbs up or the stars or something like that. I'd be curious to know how useful that is, to the actual learning of the system. And I think that is an area, like what the question there was, I think that's an area for really good design opportunity is
Yeah.
what does the feedback look like that's meaningful, right? Is it because you would think that with like AI, instead of having to give it a 4 star, I could actually go, that answer was not even close. That answer sounded really whatever to me. Like, don't do that in the future. Like, I mean, you think you could actually give it very, like you would a person kind of feedback, and
Mhm.
kind of getting to this point of like thumbs up, thumbs down, or stars or something like that. Maybe not useful feedback. That may just be more for teams trying to look at do people like our answers or not like our answers. But I think that's a whole area of feedback. I think is a key place to start. So good question.
Yeah, then it will
Yeah.
tell us to be very polite.
I don't use punctuation and I don't use any pleasers or thank yous. I just don't. Because it's I probably should, but I just won't. So,
Yes.
Okay.
So, next question for you guys.
Uh,
Organizations still don't fully trust AI. I work at one of India's leading NBFCs, and we are hesitant to use Gen AI chatbots because we're unsure of the boundaries when it comes to providing answers. Since everything is monitored by the RBI, one wrong answer could damage our reputation. How can we ensure that AI systems provide accurate and reliable information, especially in highly regulated industries?
so I'll let you answer that one. I don't know. That's a side of the business design world that I know there are smart people working on that, but that's I, my only thought is what could you present to somebody in terms of understanding the source of information and how they achieved it, and can you kind of get, if you want it, can you get into the black box area? We used to do that when we were doing calculations in for pediatric dosing of medications. Doctors would trust it, but sometimes they wanted to be able to see, show me those calculations. But this is different than that, right? This is just different than show me your math.
oh, yeah, absolutely. And this relates to the way AI understands today and the way AI is built to understand, right? So it again goes towards how better are your prompts? How are you organizing or designing your prompts? And I think that's the next topic, Ross, we should talk about, that designers should design prompts because this is a very relevant question and we are seeing more of that with our customers. The way we are, exploring right now prompt design, it is making it more and more accurate and predictable, right? So two things. One, of course, the design of prompts themselves, and it follows a certain structure. And two, testing, rigorous testing, and this cannot be your traditional QA testing, the way we kind of do it, but it has to be, kind of very different. I hope that answers your question, but reach out to us, offline, and probably we can discuss more of this.
If there are no other questions, I think we can wrap this up. Yes, I don't see any more questions.
Thanks,
Oh,
everyone.
okay, then that brings us to the end of our chat. A huge thank you to Samir and Ross for sharing their insights and thought-provoking perspectives. As we move forward, the real question is how we bridge the gap between human cognition and AI capabilities to unlock its full potential. So, we hope today's discussion has sparked new ideas and given you something to take back to your teams and projects. Thank you to all the attendees for joining us, engaging with your questions, and being a part of this important conversation.